Hey, it's Lance of 20-Sided Knight.
And I'm Evan.
And today we're going over the Goblins in Starfinder. Before we go too much into it, I just want to ask you guys to comment, subscribe, share this video with your friends, all that good stuff. But without going super extra into that, Evan, how do you feel about Goblins?
I like a lot of what they're doing with Goblins. They're similar-ish to how they were in your traditional D&D and Pathfinder, but it does explain how they've expanded because it's the future. So obviously they're in the future too.
Yeah. I feel like Goblins, they do have a lot of history and lore about them, and that's one cool thing since they have been a very quintessential part of role-playing games back when Gygax first came down from the mountain. You have a lot of Pathfinder 1 and 2 lore to bolster up their Starfinder entry, so if you ever do want some more inspiration, you have a lot to take out from them since these are such a storied race, and I like that a lot. One thing I like about Goblins is basically how they show up in the Absalom Station or Starfinder setting, where they're not really able to make ships on their own, or back in the pre-Gap days when Absalom Station was coming in and Galarion was just having an
The future?
No, an undocumented rough time. Basically, they were able to escape Galarion's catastrophe by hijacking or stowing onto the vessels of more powerful or smarter creatures, which is a typical Goblin thing to do. Never make anything for yourself, steal everything you can, basically be that archetype of just a monster.
So with Goblin Society, like you were saying, they did get to the future by basically stowing away on ships. One thing that they do say is that they're not dumb like how before most role-playing settings or fantasy settings where they're kind of like how primates now are getting good at like sharpened stones and sticks and making a boar, like riding boars. Now, because they are scrapping things together, they are doing nuclear science, so they're a little, even though it's not good, it's still nuclear science.
They're like Planet of the Apes level technology back when they were still putting them in wooden cages, kinda.
Yeah. One thing that's funny is how the book described how they got smarter and how they are different than Pathfinder Goblins is that over the generations where there's differences in gravity, nutrition, because I guess in the future they found Wonder Bread.
They're not just eating peasant food and whatever gruel fell off of the back of a cart.
Yeah, also they even said radiation leaks, so I do like how they're like going to old school comic books where it's like
it's all Buck Rogers science.
It's like he got radioactive and now he's a smart mutant. Yeah. And also Ralston, they probably found some Ralston. Yeah. And then because of how they breed super quick, so they're genetically different than your ye old goblins, so they're not even the same species.
Yeah, they list here they're a little bit bulkier, they're a little bit taller, their eyes are a little bit darker red, which can also kind of point to how they still get the -2 to their charisma because they're freaking goblins, but they don't get that -2 to their strength anymore, which we'll go over in a bit.
Yeah, but also there's still a lot of like hang-ups from the ancient past, like they're still afraid of dogs and horses because back in ye old times, it's like, oh no, I'm raiding a farmer's cabbage patch or whatever, and so he's gonna sick the dogs on me, or oh no, there's a knight on a big horse that's gonna mess me up. So now, if there's any sort of like quadruped that's coming at them, if it's little, they call it a dog. If it's big, they call it a horse. So even if it's like a giant space tiger, like horse.
Or what is that one race where it looks like that dinosaur with the club for a tail? If they see that coming their way,
I'll be like horse, and they'll be like,
I'm just a guy, man. My name is Frank.
Yeah, that's rude, dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're still, scared of things like that. And also, they do engage a lot of hero worship and god worship like their ancestors did, but they've updated it. So instead of just things like, oh yeah, and he used a sharpened piece of wood he found, and then he had a taser that he stabbed someone with. But also, one thing that's funny is that because they scavenge so much and that's how they survive, they've attributed that to Triune loves them, and that Triune has some big plan for them where it's like, oh yeah, Triune's got plans for us, and after we do that, he's going to take us to a place where there's going to be scrap everywhere as far as the eye can see. It'll be the best salvage everywhere, and that's their heaven. It's like some sort of weird hobo fantasy, and then the rest of the Triune Church, which is...
They're like, hey man...
Yeah, they're mostly robots.
Listen, Triune's not going to explicitly say that they think you're gross, but... you're gross. Please go away. That could be like a really interesting gray area quest for the party for goblins, where you have some middling level, some tree priest or priestess that's developed to them, and like, hey, so treating with all creatures, but there's these goblins, you see, and they're making the rest of us look bad because they're dealing meth in the area. They're stealing things and making very shoddy weaponry out of it. They're driving things down. So I'm not saying kill them, but if you could
get them not here, and it's not us.
Yeah, there would be some sort of donations from the church that could help you out.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a kind of. Do you think that since goblins are a neutral evil creature, would that be an evil campaign setting because it is kind of wiping out a sentient species, or do you think it would be a good thing because they are helping out their lord? Let us know in the comments below, just because I think that's interesting. What do you think it would be?
It's really kind of, I think, how you view it, because on the one hand, they're sentient and they're just as smart.
They're just worshipping?
Yeah, but also, if they're continually being rascals, and it's like, we have school on the internet, you don't have to live in this trash pile anymore and just basically just be a meth boy. And they're like, no, meth boy forever. When I go to heaven, it's going to be a dump. It's like, dude, I think you just kind of love living like this, so I can't help you, dude.
And speaking to goblin society, I wouldn't really find any sort of large clans or cities with goblin temples or buildings that you would see in a human culture or an elf culture or anything like that. Basically, I would find goblins as it has in here. You just find them sort of squalid away in the poor section of the city, or just kind of like rats. If you want to really drive home the fact that a situation or a section of Absalom Station or wherever else is really destitute, they have a rat problem, they have famine in the streets, also there's goblins afoot.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah, or just like, oh yeah, we need to do maintenance, and you open a wall panel, a bunch of goblins scattered, like, damn it, we got goblins again!
That does sort of lean into how the greater galaxy sees, or how the greater solar system, I should say, sees goblins as basically a vermin creature, and a lot of other planets, including Eox, are thankful that the goblins haven't infested their planet yet.
Yeah, as bad. Like, they're kind of everywhere, but it's one of those things where if you open a wall panel and you see a couple goblins scatter, or just like a goblin pistol, like, oh, we got goblins.
I gotta throw the whole building away. We got goblins.
It's like, well, and then your friend's like, well, at least we're not on an Absalom Station. Like, yeah, thank God.
Another thing about goblins that I'll make sure to throw in your game is sort of pull back into their Pathfinder history, where they are kind of seen as ambushers and waylayers and capturers of people who are wandering. That could totally lean into their tactics in the Starfinder setting. Say, for example, if you want to throw a random encounter into space, one thing I think would be neat is to sort of have a spaceship sending out a distress signal, and have your party go to investigate this distress signal, whether they're there to help or to do the murder hobo shuffle. When they do board the ship, they are ambushed by goblins. The goblins' goal would either be to not necessarily kill the players because you play them as cowardly or what have you, but to salvage as much of the ship as they can in order to bring onto their vessel, and then either send them helpless in there, or maybe that's their goal, is to steal technology and whatever else they can.
Yeah.
That could also be another thing. Why is this section of space barren? This is a perfectly good lane. Nobody really knows why. Your group investigates what's going on there, and they're just vast stripped down ships, and they try to figure out, what's happening here, and oh no, even space itself is
your ship's on goblins. Yeah, your ship's on blocks, and you're like, oh man, we parked in a goblin neighborhood.
Yeah, listen, they do make up about 15% of the population, but they are responsible for 53% of the crime in Absalom Station, the Spike region. So I do feel like goblins, it's a real nurture versus nature thing. We need to stop giving goblins free programs. Hey, what are y'all over there for?
Oh, no reason. So one thing that is different about goblins from like Pathfinder, D&D to Starfinder is that they are seen more as a sentient creature, where in ye old fantasy games, if you killed a goblin and were bringing their heads to the mayor's office, the cops in the streets would be like, But now it'd be like if you shot a Floridian and was dragging their body through the streets. They'd be like, "Yeah, you're going to jail. That's murder." I mean, I don't like what they're doing, but you can't just kill them, dude. You're going to jail.
I feel like goblins, they are sort of seen as vermin. They are seen as vermin creatures, so you wouldn't get applauded for it. They would just think you're cleaning up pests, and you wouldn't get maybe you would get rewards if you're trying to clean up a poor district of their goblin problem, because other societies, they're seen as like evil creatures that, again, not even Eox wants to truck with too much. So there you go. You could get prizes for every goblin area you take.
To go back on what we touched on a little bit before, with goblin technology, it is all ramshackled, and you can tell it's very much scavenged. It's not high quality, but because of the fact that it is being made from trash, it maybe gives a little bit of credence to the whole, oh, maybe Triune does love us, because...
Not that much.
Yeah, they're basically going through a dumpster and they're making a laser gun, which is like, that's impressive. I mean, it's not good, but it's impressive.
It's better than what we can do.
Yeah, like their goblin junk pistols, they don't they're basically an azimuth laser pistol. They don't shoot as far, and they're one of the only guns in the game that actually do have a critical failure. So if you do roll a 1, it's going to have the broken condition, but then you have to make an engineering check of 18, and then if you don't make it, it's going to explode, and then you have to see how long it's going to be before it explodes. And if you don't throw it away in time, it blows up in your hand like a concussion grenade.
It's basically a 1d. It's in 1d3 minus 1 rounds, and then if you get if you roll a 1 on the die, it'll explode in your hand.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny, and also it's kind of sad too, because it's like, hey, we're trying, but also they do still name things after traditional goblin things, like going back to how anything that's kind of small but on 4 legs is a dog, and anything on 4 legs and as big as a horse. So they call their swords dog slicers, and they call their any larger laser weapons, they call them horse burners, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, they do throw a lot of that ancient Pathfinder lore into there. One thing I like about their exploding with unstable junk lasers that they have going on there, it can also throw in another angle of just excitement into your game, where say if a goblin shooting at you and then panics and looks down at his weapon and he starts quickly tinkering with it, and then he fails, and your party's very much until oh, what's gonna happen? And he throws his gun at you. Some of the party's like, oh, he's just out of ammo, so they don't really think about it, and then it explodes on them. Or you're in the middle of a fight, and then on your goblin's turn, he looks down with a panic look on his face as he goes to shoot at you and misses wildly, and then his gun erupts into his hands and blows off his friggin' claws. I think that would be a fun way to keep players engaged into combat, rather than just a little bit more than just, okay, you shoot at them and they shoot at you. It's that and positioning and all that good stuff is a little bit more. It's an extra way to throw some more whimsy into your game. Most exalted creatures with an intelligence of at least 10 have some sort of spaceships or manufacturers to speak of. Goblins got none of that. It's all stolen or it's all hijacked, stolen, stowed away on, and all this button horrible. And so really, when you are mentioning goblins in your game, make sure to express that a lot, where they're just the galaxy's
rascals.
Yeah, they're just the rats of the galaxy, worse than the Skaven.
Yeah, or maybe it's like you're saying they don't have any big shipyards, but you find a goblin ship and you see something on the viewfinder, and it's like, is there's a lot of maybe your science officer's scanning something, or your magic officer, they're scrying or something, I see a large piece of scrap. Is it flying?
Floating through space.
Is it flying at us? It's got a drift drive. What is that? And then you zoom in and enhance, because in the future they're gonna have that, and they're like, oh my god, I think that's a goblin ship.
Oh,
and
no.
it's just sputtering, and there's smoke and fire coming off of it, and then they hail you, and
it looks like Titty Bang Bang.
Yeah, and when they do finally hail you, it's like how in any episode of Star Trek where someone's gotten their ass beaten, the computers are exploding and there's fire. It's they're calling you. That's going on in the background, but their captain's very calm, and it's like I'm Captain Trickle Pops. I'm here to steal your stuff, and it's like you're looking at him like, are you okay? And it's like, yeah, this is fine. Like how when Lance like, Evan, how come you haven't changed your oil in 5 years? I'm like, dude, it's fine, whatever.
So you know how goblins there's so many of them in a clutch or a crowd where they already see each other's lives as a commodity anyway, right? Maybe one of their tactics could be to just fire themselves at your ship in order to like buzz droid style board your vessel, or just otherwise use themselves as the weapon to just like once they're able to say if in Starship combat when your ship does get close enough to theirs, they try to connect or dock vehicles, right? And then once they do, instead of sending in the drones first or like shutting down your power supply or something like that, they just send wave after wave of goblin at you.
Yeah, or something where like you're saying they get close, but then they just sort of open one of like their pod bay door, like something where it's like they use something like a fighter out, but it just opens and a bunch of and it just opens and a bunch of goblins just get vacuumed onto your ship, and then they like magnetize themselves and they start cutting parts of your hull out to steal it.
You know, that would actually make for a super interesting Starship combat encounter right there. Just another way to just spice up Starship combat, I want to say.
Yeah, because they're not firing on you, but they are cutting your ship apart to scrap. So they're like cutting it out with plasma torches, and it's like, I can't shoot them. They're stealing our hull. We can't have anything nice. They're stealing our fucking rooms.
They're stealing your turret.
Yeah, it's like they're not attacking your turret, but they're just like going shh, and then it's like, Captain, we can't fire them. Why? They stole our guns.
It's like if you're driving through South Central LA and then a bunch of bloods just decide to steal your tires while you're driving.
It's like a bad pit crew where instead of like they drive by and they go and they steal your wheel and put it on a block while you're driving in traffic.
You can't leave.
That is a hell of a tactic. So what's really cool about goblins is that they do give stats. So if you do want to play a goblin, you can. To show how they're little and frail and scrappy, they only have 2 base hit points. They also have dark vision because they're still in tunnels. They're a little faster. They have a speed of 35. They get a +4 to their dexterity, but a -4 to their charisma just because they're used to crawling around vents and stealing stuff and being quick little rascals. But
the end of the day, they're still goblins, so they're gross.
So you don't trust them.
Don't know how to deal with proper society.
Yeah, so they'll probably just. And one of the things it does mention is that when they are looking over technology, like if it's like, oh yeah, my phone doesn't work, it says they will put in their mouth, so it's like, oh man, my Apple. They'll go.
Yeah, they'll taste it.
And then sometimes that'll fix it, and you'll be like, okay, that's gross, but damn, dude.
I guess Triumph does love you after all.
Yeah, it's like, I'm gross but impressed. They also have an ability called, kind of like I was just talking about Tinkerer, where if there's an item with the broken condition, they can make an engineering check, and it'll work until their next turn. The only thing is, after that, it won't work for 10 minutes, so it's kind of like how if there was like a connection to my phone that just wasn't really working, and with all the saliva, it made it work for a second, kind of like the Super Nintendo, but then it was too much spit and then it shorts it out for forever, so now I have to like throw it in rice or something. It's kind of like that. Also, they do get racial bonuses to their engineering, their stealth, and their survival to show that one, maybe Trian really does love them and they just sort of know more about technology, and for stealth, just because
they're used to stealing and being in the shadows anyway. If your whole life is just... If your entire life and your entire society was based around hiding in the shadows and stealing and really cherishing those traits, eventually there's certain things that will be passed down over generations. They just got good at it over time.
Yeah, and then survival, just because, I don't know, they live in like a hole in the ground, so you gotta learn to survive.
They live in the vents.
It's like, there's a bucket over there.
Yeah, you gotta set up traps for them, so eventually they've learned over time to how to deal with the goblin traps. The little imagine like the little lobster.
It's like, hey, listen, that cheese, it looks good, but it ain't worth it.
Yeah. One thing about goblins, if you're playing them as a player character in a game, a couple ways that I would see bringing them as a player character into a game is either they want to leave that horrifying hellscape of just basically living in squalor, stealing to survive every day,
and then your heaven is going to a junkyard.
A dump.
It's like, but it's the good dump. They got the good stuff.
Maybe you want to break away from that. You want, like, say you're casing out a group of people that you're gonna steal from, and then you see they're not eating trash, their food food hasn't spoiled yet, and over the hours or days you've been watching them, you kind of slowly think of ways to enter into that society. Mercenaries are the best way to do that. Boom, you're a goblin. That will be one way to adventuring. Or if you don't want to break away from the goblin stereotypes, because stereotypes exist for a reason. They're all true, 100% of them. One way to be a goblin adventurer with sticking to that will be maybe you're set out to join a group in order to bring back useful technology or knowledge or resources to your clan.
Yeah, or maybe you see a bad adventure group. I'm like that example where it's like, man, they're living so well, they don't even live in a dumpster. Maybe I should be like them. Maybe they run across like a bad murder hobo group where it's like, oh no, our friend died. Yeah. And they're just like, my kind of people. New York, New York. It's kind of just like that. So maybe that's why they joined that group, because it's like, they're being just like me, but they're big and they got shiny stuff. So they do what they do.
The way that I would throw a goblin and player character group into the game would be, say everybody rolls up a goblin character and have some sort of way to put there's a goblin mystic and a soldier and all that good stuff, but their goal is either to make some sort of warrant for themselves, and then your NPCs or your hostile entities in the game are actually player characters from, say, your group's last campaign or whatever, their stats, and you give them a set amount of time in order to build resources and gatherings together. Then every once in a while the big bads show up and they come down to sort of wreck or exterminate the goblin hive, or possibly have all your goblin characters, like have your goblin player character group, they are out to either scavenge some very valuable piece of technology, and then later on down the arc, you have the paladin, or I guess in this situation, the soldier and the technomancer and all those player character types. They go in, and it's their goal to smash down and root out these hostile goblin forces of your characters, just to sort of allow your players to sort of see what it would kind of be like in order to play as these NPCs they would slay without a second thought in most cases.
Yeah, and maybe like a cool, twist at the end is it's like, hey, do you want to see something like after they win or die? You could be like, hey, want to see their stats? And you throw basically their character sheets from their level 1. They'll go, whoa.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cute. Another way that you can throw goblins into your game would sort of be, I've been playing this in D&D mostly, but it totally works with Starfinder and Pathfinder as well. Any game with goblins would kind of be every once in a while, how your players, they will want to make some sort of, not base, but small community for themselves, would be buying the local inn or having some larger spaceship to keep different crew members and things on. Have a bunch of goblin NPCs, and they'll do tasks for you for sure. Like if you need, say, resources, like a more powerful turret, or just basic necessities, they will go out and they, unknown to your party, they will go out and steal it from other ships. Other people will ambush them, waylay them, do whatever they would do, and bring it back. And then eventually that catches up to be like, yeah, the VIN number is still totally on this turret that you guys took. Or
it says LAPD on that turret. What were you thinking?
Yeah, or why do all these chairs that you brought us say property of PS 198? Also, why are there a bunch of children's blood and hair on these desks? Something like that, and then you either have to, say, confront them like, goblins, what are you doing? Or,
yeah, they're just like, goblins, you're not supposed to do that, and it's like, what are you gonna do? So one way that you could put goblins in your game is you could use them to help put a game back on track. Let's say you're trying to do something, but the player characters, they're in front of the dungeon, but they can't go in. You could do something where maybe the goblins steal some of their stuff, and they go in, and then they kill the goblin because it's a goblin. But then it's like, oh, now you're in the dungeon. Or you could have that be part of a quest hook where they need to get back some of their things, where it's like they're doing some of their adventures on whatever planet, Planet X, and they come back and their hover vehicle, it's on blocks, or they go back to their ship and the door is just like plasma torched down and their drive core is down. They're like, oh no, who did this? And they find like a junk pistol there, and it's like, well, I guess we gotta find our engine.
It's like finding some crack on your blocked up car. It's like, well, I guess it's crackheads. Or I guess it's at 15% of the part about covers goblins and Starfinder. I just want to remind you all to look into Pathfinders, history, both 1 and 2, about the Goblin entries in case the entry in Starfinder, they're in the Alien Archive 1, by the way, in case that entry isn't enough, because they do have a lot of history to go back on. They have been erased since I've been playing back in 2nd edition, so they've got a long history of goblins. They do fit pretty much any game. And now I just wanted to announce the giveaway of last month, which was a Starfinder core rulebook. I want to say congratulations to Jason Hale. You are the winner of a Starfinder core rulebook. I hope this and a few other things will be enough to get you and your players into this game. Please remember to drop a comment down below, not just to be into our giveaways of cuties, but just about any topics that you want us to cover, anything else at all. Thanks you for watching 20 Saturday Night, and bye for now.
And check out Lance's fans only page.
I still don't know what that is.
You will. You will.
Making it sound weird.